The Pixar Theory.
The Pixar Theory.
The Pixar Theory.
Pixar Theory.
The Pixar Theory, a theory that connects all the films in the Pixar universe deeper than the simple Easter eggs left behind by directors, but through storylines. Pixar aficionados all across the globe have been yearning to know just how accurate the theory measures up to be, and we intend to find just that out. This is the Pixar Theory. So what do you think of the Pixar Theory? What are your thoughts?
I think the Pixar Theory is a lot more complex.
What is the Pixar Theory? I'd like to say, as many Pixar theorists say, the Pixar Theory is simply the notion that all the Pixar films are connected.
These movies, they're like different entities that take place at different times with different objects. Some are cars, people's toys.
Where contradiction starts between Pixar theorists is when we ask, what connects them? And this is when Pixar theorists begin to give different answers and move to different sides of the Pixar theory. To put it simply, I'd say that the Pixar theory is memories.
When you look at movies like Inside Out and Up, those are purely based on memories. The older man in Up wants to keep the memory of his wife alive, so he travels to this place that they both desperately wanted to go to by dragging his house and everything in it to that place to create that memory and make it stick. And this can be seen in Inside Out as well. We have the different islands with the young lady's different memories. She wants to keep those. She wants to preserve them. And the core memories is what really makes up her personality. And when you lose a core memory, you lose a part of yourself. And in the Pixar theory, you don't want to lose any part of any precious memory in your life.
Every Pixar film is focused on memories in some way, shape, or form. Let's take The Incredibles, for example. In The Incredibles, the father, Bob, is obsessed with saving his legacy and keeping the idea of superheroes in the minds of the civilians. With that memory fading, he feels like he begins to fade. Let's talk about Ratatouille. Ratatouille tries to uphold Gusteau's legacy. He tries to uphold his memory. And we can even go as far to say Dory from Finding Nemo. Dory herself is the embodiment of memory, and just how tragic it will be if someone loses their memory. The Pixar theory is really dense. I didn't think it was as dense until I did the proper research. And then I realized they're not as far-fetched as one would think. When analyzed, this is the order of the films in the Pixar theory, highlighting the more crucial films, starting with Brave and ending with Monsters, Inc., hypothetically. We tend to think, how is it possible that theorists found the timeline? And then I figured it out for myself. It was laid out for us the whole time, not only through Easter eggs, but the stories themselves. The first film in this whole timeline that actually Jon Negroni did not put on his very own timeline is The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur happens in prehistoric times. We see the meteor pass the Earth. The second and the most prominent film to begin the timeline of the Pixar theory that Jon Negroni and many other Pixar theorists start with is Brave. Personally, I like to start with The Good Dinosaur because it just creates a sense of order from prehistoric to 14th, 15th century medieval Scotland, all the way up to the final movie, which on Jon Negroni's timeline ends with Monsters, Inc. But in reality, I would like to believe that it ends with Onward.
That brings me to the great point in connecting Monsters, Inc. to Brave.
People are saying that Boo is the witch from Brave. She traveled through a door trying to find her best friend Sully. And when she went through that door, she ended up in 14th, 15th century medieval Scotland, where Brave takes place.
When you think about it, when you look at them, there's no connection. It's a Disney princess and monsters and a toddler. So you're like, what do they have in common? But when you think about it, and then you look at both movies, there's a connection. When you watch Brave, you see that Merida visits a witch. And in the witch's lair, she has a magic door. She has pictures of bears and monsters and a carving of the Pizza Planet truck. What movie has monsters, bears, the magic doors?
Boo from Monsters Inc. knew of the power that the doors held. So, growing up, she casually finds one of these doors in hopes of finding her best friend Sully, but ends up in 14th/15th century Scotland.
Who's in Monsters Inc? Boo. So when you think of it that way, you're like, well, how could something that took place in the 1400s end up in a time far away from anything that we know? But like I said, when you look and you connect, you could be like, wait, magic door, monster, Brave, magic door, monster. There's the protagonist, the antagonist. When you tie them in together, you can definitely see that where people come up with the explanation that Boo is the witch. She's searching to keep Sully's memory alive. And the only way that she can do that is if she somehow goes back in time and makes sure that all of these things keep happening.
By setting the events of Brave in place, she ultimately secures the future of Sully happening.
This creates the permanent loop.
Boo created the permanent loop. By setting the events of the past in motion, she secures the future.
What do you believe is the most crucial film, or one of the most crucial films, in the Pixar theory?
No doubt about it, WALL-E. WALL-E is when the Pixar theory began to make sense. In the film WALL-E, we see that it is a dystopia that he lives in. He's cleaning the world has been evacuated by humans, and humans have been sent off into space on the Axiom to live comfortably. But we see that the humans get too comfortable on the Axiom. WALL-E and other WALL-Es and other machines are down here cleaning the world, trying to rid it of the pollution that we humans inevitably caused. In WALL-E, we see WALL-E himself find a plant and be so infatuated with trying to keep that plant alive. Then we see the captain of the ship is unfamiliar with the way a plant works on Earth because it's been so long. Remember that we're in a dystopia. We're hundreds and hundreds of years away from the current time that we live in now, like 2020. WALL-E sets in motion the events of A Bug's Life, the events of Cars 1, 2, and 3. It sets in motion the events of Monsters Inc. onward and beyond. WALL-E is definitely the turning point in my personal research.
What's your favorite part of the Pixar theory?
Now that was a great question. My favorite part of the Pixar theory is simply the correlation between Coco and the correlation between Soul and how they talk of the second death. Now, to give a bit of background, in Soul, Joe Gardner achieves his lifelong dream and then dies. And we see him fall into a manhole onto a conveyor belt. And the conveyor belt is leading to this grand light called the Great Beyond. So, Joe died once when he fell through the manhole, but he dies a second time once he goes to the Great Beyond, hence the light. Now, in Coco, we see that Miguel, the main character, can go from the land of the living to the land of the dead through the Marigold Petal Bridge. This conceptualization of death confused a lot of Pixar theorists because they represented death in such a different way in Soul than they did in Coco. But there's so many things that weren't taken into consideration when we compared the two films. For starters, Coco focuses on Mexican culture surrounding how they celebrate the dead. We see this through their creation of ofrendas. We see this through the way that they leave images up. And we see this through them upholding the memories of their ancestors, of the people whom they once loved and cared about that passed. In Coco, when Miguel passes to the land of the dead, we see that these people are still alive because memory, as mentioned before, is the driving force of the Pixar theory. I believe that it was the Super Carlin brothers that quoted that when someone dies, they are not truly dead because their memory lives on. And Coco simply shows what happens when someone's memory is lost and doesn't live on. Hence, going right back over to the Pixar theory, focusing on memories. But in Soul, we never truly get to know Joe's beliefs or his take on death. So we see this overall view of the afterlife, and it is parallel to that of Coco. We see that there is a second death. We see that there's a bridge that leads you to the afterlife. In Coco, it's the marigold petal bridge, as mentioned before, and in Soul, it's this conveyor-like belt leading you to the grand light.
The Pixar theory is a lot more dense than we may realize. I've spent my time researching and watching movies and comparing notes from other people, and it shows that there really is a deeper connection between these movies.
Looking at the Pixar theory in grand definitely shows that there are holes. Like any theory, there are going to be holes. There are going to be questions that aren't answered. But Pixar theorists do their best to fill in those holes, which is why I have no choice but to believe this theory is true.
You just have to take a step back and stop being so one-dimensional. Think of these movies as three-dimensional beings tying into one another.
There is truth behind the Pixar theory. The only thing we're waiting for is for Pixar to confirm, because it simply cannot be denied.
In the future, I would hope that Pixar confirms this theory. I would hope that they would do us, all the people, all the Pixar theorists, a favor and confirm these.